Hi students, today I want to talk about body image and nutrition. So the title of my presentation is Does Beauty Equal Health? So I want to talk about this because I think it's important. I think it's important for college students to really think about this. All right, and so hopefully the words that I share today will help you in improving your body image and appreciating the body, the gift that you've been given from your Heavenly Father and who you are. So with that, we will begin. So I want you to take a look at these pictures. This is what popular culture would have you think is the perfect image of a human body, a male and a female. Let me show you some other pictures. These are models, right? So usually if I'm in a class, I ask the men to evaluate the pictures on the left of the women and tell me if that's attractive or not. And generally, most of those are not all that attractive to men. Now, that top picture on the left, I just have to laugh because, yeah, that's not her baby, or that's not her body. Either way, they set up an impossible goal to reach. And then obviously the one down here on the bottom is grotesquely anorexic. Okay, very unhealthy. Even this, very unhealthy. Okay, and then I ask the women about the men's bodies, and generally the women say, "Oh yeah, that's what we want men's bodies to look like." But then I have to ask, if your body looks like that, are you spending enough time on developing your mind and your other talents? It takes a lot of work to maintain a body like that, and it's not necessarily a healthy lifestyle. So I want to talk about a growing problem in our country and actually across the world, and that is our body image. When we look in the mirror, we often see something staring back that isn't reality. So women especially, when they look in the mirror, often they see themselves as fat and gross, and we are our own worst critics of our bodies, and we see rolls and bulges and things in places that no one else notices and probably aren't even there. And men are not immune to it. Just kidding. This is just a funny picture. It can actually happen to men. It's just not as common for a man to look in the mirror and be displeased, but it does happen. So what causes that? Why do we look in the mirror and come up with so many criticisms about our body? And I think it's just a cultural thing. We're always taught and we're constantly being fed things in the media that we're not good enough. Here, buy this product, buy this pill, join this gym, because you're not good enough, because what you look like is not what you should look like. Now let me show you though. These are textbook figures. Yes, I added the fig leaves. These are figures from a textbook for anatomy, the middle one and the one on the right, right? So you can see that the male body and the female body, according to scientists who would say this is the ideal body type, doesn't look like those pictures I showed you at all, right? There's not chiseled muscles down the abdomen of the male. The female doesn't have this tiny little waist and skinny little legs, right? You have bulges where you're supposed to have bulges. Now, if you look in the top left, that's Marilyn Monroe, who was a picture of beauty back in her day. And if you look at her now, I think a lot of people would say, wow, she was kind of hefty, but she was healthy and beautiful, right? And so there are curves and bulges and places where you should be squishy, for lack of a better term. So women, if you look down, and I know I do the same thing, you look down in the mirror or you look down at yourself and you see that bulge in your lower abdomen and you think, oh, I've just got this belly that just hangs out. Well, that's called a uterus. We all have one, and our uterus swells at certain times of the month and becomes bigger and pushes out, and that's totally normal, right? And men, you should know that's totally normal, right? And if you ask men, and if you're a man listening, you're probably thinking, yep, men would prefer us to be a bit squishy and cuddly and fun to hold, right? So you should be curvy and squishy and have these bulges in places that you're supposed to have bulges. And men, a lot of you might look down and think the same thing about your belly, and as you get older, it will become worse because men are stomach breathers, diaphragm breathers, and your diaphragm tends to stretch out and strengthen over time, and you get a little bit of a paunch, and that's normal also. And so a lot of what we look at in the mirror and critique as abnormal or unhealthy is just normal bodies. And everybody's body shape is very different based on your genetics. So 90% of what you look like is just your genetics and your genetic predisposition. And there's very little control we actually have over a lot of how our body looks. So keep that in mind and don't be quite so hard on yourself. I'm going to share with you some statistics. Now, I realize these statistics are all over the place, and that's because it depends on the sample they took and the source of the research. But generally, they paint a pretty disturbing trend. So among college students, 35% of normal dieters will progress to pathological dieting. Of those, 20 to 25% will develop a full spectrum eating disorder like anorexia or bulimia. According to this source, 6% of freshmen come into college with an eating disorder. According to another source, 15% of women of college age have eating disorders already. 40% of female college students have an eating disorder or will develop an eating disorder during their college years, 25% of males. 91% of female college students have attempted to control their weight through dieting. That's not surprising. And so we have all of these statistics saying that people have eating disorders, especially women in college age. Now, this is a disturbing statistic. So the average woman in the US today, this is not disturbing, weighs 140 pounds and wears a size 12. What's disturbing is that the average model, the people who are on display as what you should look like and the clothes you should wear, weighs 103 pounds and wears a size 4. So you can see how that doesn't match up, and it could give you a complex, especially these young girls. I mean, I've seen girls as young as first grade worrying about their weight, which is silly. So don't let TV, magazines, and ads dictate your health. Now, I have to tell you, when I was in college, this was back when dinosaurs roamed the earth, it was the big fat-free craze of the 90s. And we all ate fat-free everything. I remember going on dates with my friends, my girlfriends, in a group date with a bunch of boys, and we'd go out to McDonald's or something, and we'd all sit there and eat ketchup packets instead of ordering food because ketchup is fat-free. It was ridiculous. And I didn't realize it at the time, and I wish that somebody had said something to me like I am saying to you. In college, when I got to college, I decided I wasn't going to eat any fat of any kind, and no meat, and no sweets. And so I literally lived off of fat-free tortillas, fat-free refried beans, frozen peas and corn, and ketchup. And I ate no meat, and I ate no fat, and I was a good 10 pounds heavier than I am now after having 4 children. So I wasn't thin, but I was very unhealthy. And I know now that I had a full-blown eating disorder, and I didn't know how to feed myself, and I was so worried about what I would look like that I deprived my body of nutrients that I needed. And as a consequence, my gallbladder, which is responsible for processing fats, it died, literally withered away and died. They had to remove it surgically when I got married and started eating normal again. My body freaked out. I've been unhealthy for a long time, and I will suffer consequences for the rest of my life of stupid diet choices that I was too dumb to change. So I'm hoping that with a little bit of knowledge about nutrition and a little bit of confidence in your own body and who you are, you can avoid the stupid things that I did and avoid the health consequences that will follow me around forever. So let me show you a picture. This is my mom and my sister. Yes, I know you're thinking, where in the world did I come from? I don't know. But this is my mom and my sister. My sister is gorgeous. My mom is gorgeous. And it's interesting. My mom and my sister always feel like they are quote unquote heavy people. And it cracks me up. And my sister, she and I were sharing clothes when she was 13 and I was 22. We were sharing clothes. A lot of her hand-me-downs are too big for me, and she weighs quite a bit more than I do. But now we wear the exact same clothes, but I think she's probably 20 to 30 pounds heavier than me, but it's pure muscle. So her body genetically is just different than my body. I am like this skinny beanpole, muscleless Scandinavian person, and she is a muscular, athletic, Germanic person. And it's just genetics. And so even though we basically wear the same size clothes, she's quite a bit heavier. So don't let the scale tell you what matters either, because I'm pretty sure she could bench press me. My mom, it's interesting, she always said to me in college she was hefty, that she'd gone through a fat stage in college. And one time she was going through these, the box of clothes from her college days, and she found these really cute wool skirts, and she gave them to me, and she's like, oh, they probably won't fit you though because I was pretty hefty in college. Yeah, I couldn't even get them zipped. They were so tiny. And so it tells me that she had the same complex when she was in college that I had, that thinking that we were so big when we were not, when we were normal. And so there's this crazy mentality out there, and I think this is important for boys to understand. And certainly boys have issues like this too, but I think it's important for boys to understand the things that are going through girls' heads, and just go ahead and tell us. If you take us out to eat on a date and your date orders a simple salad and doesn't put any dressing on it, and will you just tell her that she looks beautiful and eat, for heaven's sake, because you need food? And tell her she looks amazing, right? Because we struggle with this. So what is the proper amount? So let's talk about that. All right, so I've just given you sort of just a general sense of what's good and what's not. And obviously, this is an average. It's different for everyone, but this is based on the 2,000 calorie diet, the FDA national average of what you should consume. So take it for what it's worth. But I want to talk to you about each one and what happens when you have too much and what happens when you have too little. So water. We lose about 3 liters of water a day. We gain about half of that back in the food we eat, so not counting drinks that we drink, but just in food. So the other half you actually have to drink, okay? And that varies person to person, but about 1.5 liters a day. Too much, we talked about that when we talked about diffusion and cell membranes. So too much, you get water intoxication, brain cells pop, really bad stuff. Really hard to do though, because it's really hard to drink too much water. You will get sick. I mean, your tummy will tell you to throw it all up. So it's really almost impossible to drink too much water unless you're impaired in some way. But too little is very easy to do on accident, and too little leads to dehydration, which gives you muscle cramps, fatigue, headaches, dizziness, nausea, confusion, high heart rate, hallucinations, heat stroke, death. So it's important to get water. Carbohydrates. So absolute minimum, about 100 grams a day is what they recommend. They recommend actually 125 to 175. Obviously, complex carbohydrates are better than simple carbohydrates, and we'll talk more about these if we haven't already when we talk about macromolecules. But complex carbohydrates like starch and cellulose rather than simple sugars like M&Ms. Too much, it does get stored as fat. It'll first store as glycogen in your muscles, but once that's full, it'll be stored as fat. So obviously don't want to do too many carbs, but too little can be very dangerous. And I know there's a trend that has been around for a long time, this Atkins diet, where you don't eat any carbs and you force your body to metabolize fats and proteins. It's not a bad thing necessarily if you're diabetic. But if you're not diabetic, it can lead to some pretty bad side effects. First of all, when you don't have any carbohydrates in your diet, you do turn to proteins and fats. Protein metabolism can be good, but it also produces, when you crop the little amino acid or the amine group off of a protein to make it into a sugar, that amine group can build up as ammonia or uric acid crystals, and that can cause gout in your joints. It's very painful. Fat metabolism also has an unfortunate side effect of ketone bodies that are throughout your system, and you can end up in ketoacidosis, which is a dangerous drop in the pH of your blood. It actually happens to diabetics when they don't have their insulin. And so you have to be careful. There's moderation really in all things, and we've heard this before, right? But interestingly, so if you don't eat any carbs, your body will turn to protein, and that's your muscles, including muscles like your heart. So anorexics often die of heart failure because they literally eat their own heart and muscle. Okay, so it can be bad. Proteins. All right, so proteins. Oh, I'm sorry, I had pictures here. So there's 1.5 liters of water. Here is about 125 grams of carbohydrates. So you need all of that in a day. A potato, oatmeal, rice. What are those? Pretzels. Okay. So let's talk about proteins. So proteins, You must consume the essential amino acids. So we'll talk about this more if we haven't already, but there are 20 amino acids, and about half of them you cannot build on your own. They're essential, so you have to consume them. You have to eat them. All right, and so if you don't eat them, it can lead to problems, which we'll talk about in a second. Recommended 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight. So I realize you have to convert your pounds to kilograms, but convert your pounds to kilograms and then multiply by 0.8, and that'll tell you how many grams of protein you need. Okay, so I figured out, I think for a 150-pound person, that's how much protein you need. Okay, in a day, and you get it in other foods besides meat. Too much. So if you eat too much protein, it acts the same way as eating too many carbohydrates. It gets stored, and it gets stored as fat. Not only that, but consuming animal protein does come with some unfortunate side products like cholesterol, okay, and saturated fat. And so you have to be careful where you get your protein sources. I think meat is the most convenient way to get protein, but that's because I am not a creative cook, not a very good cook, and kind of lazy about that. So I'd rather just eat meat and get it. But you can get it from plant products and combinations of plant products. You just have to make sure you get all of the essentials. Because if you look at the too little category, if you're missing any of the essential amino acids, then your body can't actually construct the proteins that it's trying to construct. So any of the other amino acids that you consume are just wasted or stored. And so like me, when I was in college, I ate zero protein, and I actually was heavier than I am now. And that's because I think I was just storing all the amino acids that I was eating from other products, they were just getting stored as fat because I didn't have the essential amino acids. And in the meantime, my hair and my skin and my organs were shutting down and dying because I didn't have the essential amino acids that I needed. So it's very important that you consume all the essential amino acids. Like I said, it's fairly easy to do if you eat a variety of vegetables, but I know my family, me, I am not super into vegetables. That's terrible to admit. And so getting a variety is sometimes difficult. So for me, the easiest way to get all the essentials is just to eat a piece of animal protein, because animal protein has all of the essentials in it. All right, so let's talk about fats. So fats work the same way as proteins as far as essential and non-essential. So there are fats, fatty acids, that you cannot build in your body. They're essential. You have to consume them in your food. It is recommended that 30% or less of your caloric intake come from fat and 10% or less come from saturated fat, but you do have to have fat in your diet. Okay, and that's because there are fat-soluble vitamins that can only be absorbed if there's fat in the food that goes through your system. So you have to have those in order to get vitamin D and A and E and K. These are essential vitamins to the body's function, and you need them, and you can't get them without fat. All right, so too much fat, obviously it gets stored in our hips and butt and everywhere else. But too little can be very, very dangerous. So not only are you not getting your essentials, so you can't build things like cell membranes and myelin sheaths around your nerve cells in your brain. There's a lot of things that you can't build without these essential amino acids. But also, there's a lot of other things that fat does for you. So I talked about the gallbladder already. The gallbladder processes fats. Without fat in your diet, you can have the malfunction. You also can't absorb fat-soluble vitamins. Your skin gets yucky. You have a hard time regulating your temperature. But one of the biggest and scariest things for women, if your percentage of fat in your body drops too low, your body will decide, in quotes, will decide that you are not fit to reproduce, right? So your body can only reproduce if your fat percentage is up high enough to maintain a fetus. If it's not, you will stop your periods. And if you stop them for long enough, you can go through menopause. You can go through menopause at 20 years old. And if that happens, you will never have children. Your skin and your hair will begin to get old. Your bones will begin to deteriorate as if you were an old person. I had a friend that was on the verge of menopause at 19 because her body fat was too low. So it's important, if you've stopped cycling, you really should go see a doctor and make sure that you're not in danger of this, because it would be so sad if you couldn't have any children for that reason. Vitamins and minerals. So again, the amount depends. Oh, I didn't put up the fat. This is how much fat. So 3 tablespoons of butter. It's about how much you need in a day. Now, obviously, we don't sit around and eat tablespoons of butter, but you get your fat in other ways like candy, chocolate bars, and meat, things like that. So vitamins and minerals. It depends on the vitamin or the mineral as far as the amounts go, but it is very small amounts, and you generally get them if you have a well-balanced diet. Too much vitamins, if it's a water-soluble vitamin, you really can't get too much. You just have really expensive urine because you just pee it out. But if it's a fat-soluble vitamin, you can definitely overdose on it. In fact, that's one of the leading causes of poisoning death among children is an overdose of fat-soluble vitamins and minerals like iron, right? So they get a hold of Flintstone vitamins, they're yummy, they eat them all, and they die. Too little causes all kinds of crazy diseases. So blindness, rickets, scurvy, anemia, blood clotting issues, osteoporosis, muscle tetanus, etc. So you want to make sure you're getting your minerals. And it turns out all this research that scientists do on nutrition, the best diet is the Word of Wisdom diet. I kid you not. It gives you the best health, best bacterial flora, best everything. So I guess God knows what he's talking about. So moderation in all things is what we're going for. This is just some interesting things. Your metabolic rate, that's the basal metabolic rate. It's how many calories you burn just to stay conscious. Average for a person is about 70 calories per hour, but it's different by your body type, right? How big you are, how much you weigh, how tall you are, how much you're thinking during the day. So if you're sitting here listening to this and digesting this information, you're actually burning more calories than if you were sitting and watching television, let's say. Other activities that shows you there on the left, how many additional calories per hour you can burn, and it's based on body weight. So the heavier you are, the more calories you burn. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn. So it's all relative. This is interesting, differences between genders. Okay, so men burn more calories due to higher testosterone than women do. That leads to higher fat metabolism. So men, you just have it easier. And I don't know if you women have ever experienced this, but like men and women, they'll be like, all right, we're going to lose weight, and they'll start going to the gym, and men see results almost immediately, and women see nothing forever. And that's just a difference in our metabolism. Okay, men have more muscle in their bodies, just genetically because they're a male, and muscle requires more calories to maintain than fat, so they burn more calories that way as well. In addition, women need more body fat to maintain fertility. We talked about that. So healthy body fat range is different between women and men because women, again, are supposed to be squishy and soft. And, excuse me, that amount of fat helps us to be fertile. In addition, women have an 8% thicker dermis layer. So the layer of fat that's directly beneath your skin that sort of protects your muscles and internal organs, it's thicker in a woman. Okay, again, that leads to our squishy softness that men like, but it also means that your muscles will be less well defined. So you may have the same six-pack that your male counterpart has, but you're not going to see yours as well because you have this nice, lovely, soft layer of squishy goodness over top. Right, and then we talked about the placement of the diaphragm a little bit. So in men, their diaphragm is a bit lower and they breathe more with their diaphragm. In women, we're more chest breathers. We use our intercostal muscles more, and that's just because when you get pregnant, you can't really use your diaphragm to breathe. It's almost impossible, and so we are chest breathers, and so we get bulges in different places, and the same thing with the uterus. Women have a giant blood-rich organ down there that causes a bulge, so it's okay. So next time you look down and go, oh, my belly is fat, just say, it's a uterus, and it's okay that you have it there. So, risks of eating too much and too little. I think we've covered a lot of these. Eating too much, one of the biggest health threats to Americans is diabetes. This is type 2, so this is not the insulin dependent. This is the later onset diabetes. It is common in obese people. We're still trying to figure out the connections there, but it causes you to be insensitive to insulin, and it causes major problems and risk of death. Hypertension, so high blood pressure is one, and then heart attack and stroke. As you consume a lot of fat, you get cholesterol, and there's good cholesterol and bad cholesterol, and the cholesterol can lead to hardening of your arteries, and that leads to death. Eating too little, anorexia and bulimia, so according to these statistics, 1 in 5 college-age women 1 in 20 college-age men starve themselves. Consequences is heart tissue damage due to lack of nutrients. Amenorrhea is the lack of a period. And then when you stop cycling, you lack estrogen. That leads to osteoporosis, so your bones get brittle. Bulimia obviously destroys your teeth, can rupture your stomach, really bad things. So you want to make sure that you're just moderation in all things. So I just want to leave you with some final words of wisdom. The best way to lose weight is actually just to lower your caloric intake and increase your activity level. Now, obviously, there are lots of medical conditions and genetic conditions that can cause this to be easier or harder for certain people than other people. But generally, the best way is not to be dramatic, is not to go on some crazy diet, but to just lower the calories you consume and increase your activity level. But interestingly, if food is your vice, this is good news. Researchers have shown that it is better to be fat and fit than lean and lazy. So there was an article done where they went out and looked at professional athletes and other people who, like if you look at these football players who are linebackers and they're huge, but they're very fit, they're very athletic, and it turns out that you're actually healthier if you are athletic but maybe a little thicker than someone who is super lean but never lifts their finger, never exercises. So if food is your vice, if you love to eat, then just exercise more and be athletic, right? But ultimately, be happy with the skin you're in. The skin that you're in is a gift from your Heavenly Father. It is your temple for your spirit. It is your body. You should be happy with who you are when you look in the mirror, and know that the Lord loves you exactly the way you are.